Welcome back. After a long break, I want to continue what I had started more than a month ago, which was this idea of building a bar for Wayland, specifically Hyprland in this case. And I just wanted to review kind of where we left off and then pick up from there with how we're going to make our different built in bar modules. And to start off, we're going to just take care of getting those so that we can configure them and so that we have them kind of laid out without getting quite yet into the details of making them. That'll probably be a third video, maybe more, as we walk through this. So for this burn bar, we started off and we did get the bar showing with CSS support, and we put two little buttons in there, and we made one of the buttons have a popover. So just to remember what that looks like, just run cargo run here. And then we see on the bottom there's the two buttons that we had, and this one when we click, there's a popover, and this one doesn't do anything. So I'm just going to Control C to kill that. Again, we're just putting it on the bottom for now, just so I can separate it from my top bar that is Hyper panel. But anyway, the first thing I want to talk about is for these kind of modules at the bottom where we're going to have our clock, similar to up here, we're going to have our clock, our little wireless thing, all these things. We don't actually want to use buttons. So right now we have our top level window, and it has a layout box on it that is the big parent layout box. And we're going to use that, but right now the things we're putting into it are buttons. And we don't want to use buttons, we want to use boxes. And the reason we're going to use boxes is that boxes are containers in GTK that let us put any number of things. So we can have a module that's just a button, we can have a module that was a label and a button, or drop down. They just let us, a box can contain multiple widgets, so this will, if we standardize that our individual little slots on the bar are boxes, that means we can have some more complicated and interesting little modules, or whatever you want to call them. So let's start there. Sorry, I'm a little bit slow today because I have just kind of remapped my keyboard and I'm getting used to it. It's a Kinesis, and I just kind of moved where the window key is to somewhere that makes things a lot easier, but it is taking some getting used to for me. Alright, so right now we make these two buttons, and then we're just putting the buttons right here into the layout box. So just to show you on one of these before we move on to kind of other things, what I mean by that is instead of just having this button here, we would make a box, and we just make that actually still have, again, what do you call it, Copilot on, but that's actually okay right now for this. Speed things up a little bit because I am doing pretty boring stuff right now. Alright, so if we make a box here and then we just do our so we're making a box, we're saying that its orientation is vertical. I probably want the orientation to be horizontal, actually. And then 5, this argument is the spacing. Now, we already talked about this a little bit because our layout box is a box with the horizontal layout and everything. Alright. Actually, I am going to shut Copilot off because it's going to start doing very wrong things as it tends to. Let's see here. Let's get out of there and back in. Okay, there we go. Alright, so this box, we're going to take the box and append the button. And it's going to want that button by reference, so I do need to put the little thing there. And now our button's in our box, and instead of adding the button to our top layout box, we're going to add box 1. So that's all I mean by, instead of directly adding single widgets into our top layout, we're going to add these boxes that can contain multiple things. Like if you see where my mouse is here looking at the existing bar, this has a little image and then a percentage on it, so multiple things. So boxes, using boxes is kind of our standard for our module, will give us a lot more flexibility. So that's just one idea I want to talk about there, and if we run that, it should still work. It won't look any different because the box only has a button in it, so that's kind of that. But just to talk about that, because we are going to make we're going to start setting this up for, got my reference one over here, for making this configurable. Alright, so I am going to first, let's see here, how can we do this? I think first we're going to add our idea of these separate modules. We're going to put them in different files. And, we're going to add a directory here for storing our modules. I got to be careful here. I have the same problem as with Box. If I name it exactly modules, it can get confusing because Rust has a built-in concept called modules. So I think I'm going to call this bar. No, I think we'll be okay. I'm going to call this modules, and hopefully that won't get too confusing. Okay. And then this modules, oh, that didn't quite do what I want. Yeah, we're going to delete that. I think I have to end it with a slash. Okay, and then in modules, I'm going to add some files here, and we're just going to, I think, make 2 for now. So I'm going to add one called battery, for like our battery indicator, and we'll add a clock. So we'll make clock.rs. And now we got those 2. And then since we have a folder here, and we're going to be adding it to our main project, we do need a mod.rs that is going to kind of define everything that's in here. And then what I'm going to do in each of these, before I go including them all, is each of these is going to have just a function that returns a GTK box. So this will be a function that you call that'll draw up this module with all the handlers attached and everything. So I'm going to call this one in battery.rs. I'm going to call this function module battery. And this is eventually going to take something, but we won't worry about that just yet. The important part right now is that it needs to return a GTK4 box. So this is going to be called by main to make the battery module, and it's going to just make a box here. So then let's just fill in some dummy stuff here. This is just going to make a box with a label in it that says battery. So we can make our mod box here and set that equal to GTK4 box. And we'll make a new one, and this is going to have that orientation of horizontal and 0 for the padding. Okay, and then I'm not really getting my autocomplete yet because I actually do need to get this all kind of included. So over in mod, sorry, just referring to my other one here. All right, over mod, we're going to do mod battery and mod clock to say that we want those. And then we could just put those as like re-exports, but I'm actually going to use to just export the functions kind of all in one big batch. So I think that'll make things easier. I'm going to copy this for now into clock, and we'll just call this one clock. Okay, we're missing some includes here, but we're just not getting warnings because the LSP doesn't really know everything's kind of hooked up yet. So now my battery and clock functions, and here I'm going to use pub use battery module battery and use clock module clock. Doing this a little bit backwards looks useful, but okay, so now we just need to go over to main. And I'm using my mouse a little bit more often because, like I said, I need to refer to this one over here. And then in main, we're just going to declare those with mod modules. Okay, and that should hook everything up. And now we're getting LSP stuff. So now it's yelling at us for the fact that these are not. These are missing some includes here. So. Okay, this actually is fine because we're fully using it. We're just not returning it. So let's just return it like that. There we go. And then clock will do the same thing. Okay, so now it's being returned. It is warning us that we could do something better there, but we're going to do a little bit more here anyway, so it is okay. So let's kind of finish these up for what we're doing now. So like I said, we're going to have this box. We're just going to put a single label on it. I'm going to do a few things here. I'm going to set before putting the label in, I'm going to set a CSS class on this box so that all of our modules, all these little boxes we're going to put up here, are going to share the same CSS class so we can style them all together. And then we'll use IDs so that we can style them individually as well. But for right now, let's just get that CSS class in there. So I'm just going to do modbox.set CSS classes. And we're just going to, we give it in a slice of strings that we want to, so bar module, just one class there we're going to set, and now it has a CSS class, and then we're going to make a label. So this is a GTK4 label, new, and this just takes a option string, so some, which one is this? This is battery, right? Battery. Okay. And now that we have our label, let's put the label in the box. Okay. This should have a method called append. I think we just need that. We need to include that prelude for box extensions so that we have that append. All right, and that is basically what I want to do for now. This will give us a battery module that just shows the word battery in a label, so that's fine. And then I'm just going to copy this because we're going to do the same thing for clock initially. So let's just get rid of these, and let's change that to say clock, and then take care of this. Alright, and now we have our battery and clock modules all written as just these functions that return a box. Right now they just have a label and it says clock and battery. So just to show you how breaking those out into functions is going to work. We got those done, we got them exported through the module, and now in main, I'm going to get rid of those two buttons we're adding, and I am going to replace them by calling those two functions. So let's get rid of all this stuff here. We're not going to worry about pop-ups for now. So we're just going to delete all that. And now we just have our layout box, and instead of appending these things, we're going to append our clock and battery. So let's say let battery equals, let's see here, modules, module battery. And let clock equals module clock. And then that should give us back a battery box and a clock box. There we go. So now let's run it and see where we're at. And now we can see it made two little labels there. They're very faint that say battery and clock. So we're going to work on our CSS to get those styled a little bit nicer so we can see them a little bit better, and then we'll move on. So let's go here. Now we added we're going to get rid of some of this stuff. We're going to get rid of button, pop over contents. I am going to add some stuff to the window. I'm just going to add some padding to the left of 10 pixels and some padding on the right of 10 pixels. I didn't use padding inline here because while padding inline is a way to do those in one shot in normal CSS, GTK4's CSS does not support padding inline or padding blocks, so you do have to explicitly set those that way. I could have done the shorthand padding, but it's all right. All right, and we added a class called bar module to each of those things. So here we can put some stuff in here. So I am going to just copy this stuff from my reference one, and then we'll talk about it, just so you don't have to watch me type all of this out. And this just gives it a kind of very soft black gradient, white text, puts a white border around it with a kind of curved border, so we'll get those like little oval buttons, and put some padding on the left and right of the button. So with that in place, now if we run it, those are styled a little bit nicer where we can see what's going on. So we made a battery and clock module and added those. So hopefully that makes sense what we did there and how we've kind of laid this out now. So now all of our logic for our battery module and our clock module, we're going to go in there. And let's go to main.rs and talk about config. So now we got these, and we are going to just have a set of built-in modules the same way that Waybar does. I thought about, and maybe in the future I might do one that uses Lewis scripting or something like that to let people define their own modules a little bit nicer. But for now, it's just going to be a hard-coded set. But we do want to let the user choose which ones they want to include and what order they want them in and how they're going to lay them out, the same way Waybar does. So we do need to add a config file here. So we're just going to make a file called config.toml that has our config in it. And the way we want this to look is that they would put an array of modules here. So they're going to put, like battery and then clock, and that would put those in that order. Pretty simple. And then later what we'll do is that modules property, we'll let them pick which ones are going in, and then we'll have other properties like battery that will, other headers called battery, under which they'll put all the properties for configuring the actual battery module with all of its options and everything. So this top property, this modules thing, is just to pick which ones are going in and what order they go in. Okay. So let's get that so that it works, so that it is reading our config to decide how to lay things out. So let's go back to main and let's talk about how to do our config. All right, so for the config, that toml file, we want to deserialize it into some kind of object that explains our config. We're going to make a struct called config, and we're going to put some derivatives on this. Serialize, deserialize. I may have to include Saturday. We might not have that yet. And default. Okay, we don't have serialize and deserialize, and I don't think, because we don't have Saturday. So cargo add Saturday. Okay. We do need to add some features there. We need derive and let's see, what else do we need here? Oh, we do need TOML as well for reading TOML files. And that should do it. All right, we might be okay here. Okay. All right. Misspelling here. Okay. So now we got Saturday, so we can serialize and deserialize our config. And in here, we just want to put that in our config, we have a property called modules. We'll make that pub. Modules that is a vector of bar modules, which is not something we defined yet, but we will. And we're going to put Saturday default on here so that we'll do a empty vector if they didn't define it. And then we just need to make this bar module thing that has all of our modules. Now, this is a little bit tricky. The whole way I did this config, I had a lot of help from a coworker that is much better at these things than I am. But nope, that's not right. There we go. Okay, but this ended up being the way to do it, which is we're just going to make an enum of all of the different types we have here. So we just have battery and clock at the moment. And we do need to name that enum a bar module. And then we're going to put some derives on that as well. We need to serialize, deserialize, so that we can serialize and deserialize it from the config. Debug, so that we can print this as we're working through it. Clone and partial EQ. Okay. Alright, that should be singular. Okay. So now that works. The next thing we want to do, though, is that will read in the config, but it'll just put them as these kind of enum values. We want to, once we've read that in from the config, we want to kind of map those enum values onto these functions we made over here. And the way we're going to do that, where we can get from this enum to these kind of function pointers or whatever, is we're going to put a function on bar module. So we're just going to do impl bar module, and we're going to add a function called call. And that is on the object, so we're going to put that self argument there, and it's going to take a config object. The reason why is we're going to update these, but when we call the individual things, let me start off without doing that actually, so we can explain that when we get there. Okay, so we're just going to put call on self, and call is going to return a GTK 4 box. And each of those are just going to map to their things. So we're just going to match self. And if they are putting call on battery, we're going to call that battery function. So bar module battery battery is going to give us module battery, and then of course clock is going to call module clock. And then as we add modules, we'll have to update this and then this implementation here. And among many other things, this is a little bit weird the way we had to go about this for getting our we need to use this enum so that Saturday will do the right thing for deserializing this, and we need to do this so that we can get from the enum to the actual function call. But one nice thing about this is as we add things here, we have to add them there or it'll warn us because it is a incomplete match statement. So, getting close there. So now we should be able to load up our config, and then we should be able to just go through this vector and just loop through it and call on it, and that will just call each of those things to make the things, and then we can just add them. Okay. So we're not really loading the config yet, so this is maybe a little bit hard to follow because it's a little bit theoretical right now, but we'll get it running, and then you'll see what I mean. So let's go down to Build UI, where we were before, and we're going to let's see here. What do we do? I want to do things. Yeah, we're going to get our config text, and that is just going to be fs read to string config.toml. We'll worry about putting these in the right place later when and if we have an actual bar we want to ship. But right now it's just the current directory. We're going to read config.toml. And then we're going to let config equal to toml from string config. And that's saying we want to take a string and serialize it in a new config object. And the config text. And we're just going to call unwrap on that. And if they screwed up the config, we're going to crash, which is just as well, because that's about the best thing we can do here. And then for now, let's just have this print out the modules, so just we can see that things are working so far, so we're not driving as blind. And let's do that. And this is going to work because we put debug on that. So that should work. So now if we run it, it's still going to just add battery and then clock, not from the config. But we'll see what modules are loaded from the config. Let's go cargo run. So we're not quite there yet with this config thing, but we can see there it did load up the modules from the config file. So now we have what we need, so we know that config read is working. So now that we have those loaded, let's get rid of this part here where we are doing this append. And instead, we're going to do a loop here, and we're going to do for bar mod in config modules. I think we have to do clone here. You'll see why in a moment. We don't actually need to write this moment, but we will. And then we're going to get the box for the module by calling bar mod.call, which will take that bar mod, which is just that enum value, and map it into the appropriate function call and give us back the built-out GTK box. And then we're just going to do layout box dot append mod box. Okay. That does want a reference. Okay. I'm going to change the name of the layout box here just to clarify this, because they're all layout boxes. So I'm going to change this to be named window box, so we know it's the top level window box. Okay, so now it should be adding stuff. It should be loading up our modules we want from the config file and then looping through those and adding them from the config file. So if you remember on our config file, geez, I got a lot of stuff open at this point, so I'm just going to do PO and config. Okay, so in our config file we have battery then clock, so that's what we'd expect to see here if we called run. And it does do battery then clock. And just to show you that that works, there is nothing, I don't think, there's nothing keeping us from adding one multiple times. So we'll just add battery, clock, battery, battery, and see if that works. Okay. Yep, There we go. So now we have our modules defined and we're loading them right from a config file, which is pretty cool. Now we have a configurable bar and we have our modules kind of broken out into separate files where we can define them. And then I'm just going to add another thing here that we kind of came up with while working through this ahead of time. Oh, we don't need these anymore. Okay. And that is, what's really neat is with like waybar and stuff, you can put some on the left, some in the center, and some on the right. So we'd like to be able to do that. And initially I did that by having just 3 sections of left, middle, right. And then you would make 3 arrays and add them accordingly. But again, brilliant coworker had this idea. She was over here while we were kind of just working on a bunch of stuff and talking through some things. And that was, instead of only allowing left, middle, and right, we could make a special module called spacer that would just take up as much space as it could, and then you could put, some modules, spacer, some modules, spacer, some modules, and that would give you left, center, right. Or you could also do even more, like 4 of them, and get like 4 sections, or any number of things like that. And I'll show you how that works. So we're going to add one called spacer.rs, and initially I'm just going to copy clock here, and then we'll work from there. Let's get that in the mod. So mod spacer. We do need to change the name of this function to kind of match the scheme we've been using. Spacer. Okay. So there's mod spacer, and then pub use spacer, module spacer. Okay. So we got our spacer module here, and spacer is going to, instead of having a, well, we're not going to put that bar module class on it because it's special. We actually don't want it outlined. It doesn't really have any appearance at all. It's just there to space things. And it doesn't have a label either. It's just the plain old box. We're going to put one property on this box. So it's just going to be an empty box. But this is kind of the magic here is we do mod box dot set h expand to true. And that will just mean that this is a box, an empty box that expands as much space as it can. So now, that's it. Now we've made a spacer module. So let's go back to main, and let's add our spacer module here. Okay, and then that's warning us that we need to put spacer in here and have that call modules, module, spacer. Okay. And now, spacer is something that we can add. So that also showed you, let's get rid of some of these, remove all the unused imports, there we go. Not using that either. Okay. So that also showed you how easy it is to add a new module. We just made a new file over here, added it to mod, added it here, and added a call to map. So define the enum and then add a thing here to map the enum value to the function call. So now we have a thing called spacer. So that will do what we want. So let's look at how that works. So now let's put a battery on the left, then a spacer. Then in the middle, we're going to have a clock and a battery, and then a spacer, and then just a battery. And let's see what that looks like. If all goes well, yep. So you can see we have battery, spacer, clock, battery, spacer, battery. And because we did it with spacers instead of just doing left, right, center, that means, you could make 4 or 5 sections. You can even put spacers on the left and right if you wanted kind of the equal gaps on the edges. So if we did that here, we would get this kind of thing where we have, equal, the whole thing's kind of centered a bit. So that can be interesting. think I want that though. So we'll get rid of this. Okay. And then just to wrap up here, before we move on, because this is about what I wanted to cover today. But just going to make a few more modules just so we have a little more to look at here for playing with this. I think I want... we have two modules, two actual ones, battery and clock here. I think I'm going to add 3 more, just so we have enough to play with. We're not going to add all the ones we're going to make here. We just want enough so that we can play with these layouts and see if they work. So I'm going to add Bluetooth, and let's add one for media, and let's add one for volume. Bluetooth, media, and volume. That sounds good. Alright, and then all those, we're just going to copy this stuff. So Bluetooth. Yeah, we'll get that set in a second. Media, so I don't lose my clipboard. I don't like using multiple registers. So, right, all. Okay. And now let's get these fixed up so they're named right. Volume, name the function right, and we'll fix the strings while we're in here. Okay, so volume's all set. Media, and Bluetooth, right? Yeah. Bluetooth. Alright, so volume, media, and Bluetooth should be ready to go. Let's add them over here in mod. Let's do them in order. Bluetooth. I think, it's going to clean it up. Rust format's going to clean it up anyway, but media and volume. Let's see. And then we're going to put usings on those so that they're all the functions are kind of exported from mod. Again, so Bluetooth, yep, and then media, yep, and then volume. Okay. Alright, those are all exported now, and now we just need to go to main and take care of those 3 new things. So, again, I think I don't know if it orders these correct, but I like to keep in order, so media and volume. Alright, then we need to take care of those here, so bar module, Bluetooth. I'm actually curious if it'll fix this. Yeah, that makes sense that it wouldn't, but I wanted them in order, so. Module, media, module, media, and then volume. Okay, so now we have some more here, so that should work. So let's try making our config not have the repeats now, so it doesn't seem as weird. So now we can put, sure, we can put battery there, and then in the middle we'll put media, and then we'll put, what else? Clock in the middle as well. And then Bluetooth at the end, and volume at the end. Okay, so now I think we're using all of them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then we got 2 spacers in there. So now if we run it, we can see, all those different modules there. Okay. So I think this is about where I wanted to stop now, which is just to get these modules broken out into their own files and get a config file where we configure these. Oh, there is one more thing we wanted to do. As I told you, we're going to add to this config file that we want some extra sections in here for configuring the battery, where we'd be like, battery, I don't know what we're going to do, but, maybe full icon equals, some ASCII character here, or, something or other. So basically all these modules, we'd like them to have access to all or part of the config. The easier thing I decided to do was just to pass the config down to all of the modules. So what we're going to do is we're going to fix these modules so that they all take an argument, which is the config. So these are going to take an argument. I'm going to put an underscore here because we're not going to use it yet. They need to take that config. Okay. All right, yank in the parentheses, and let's do the rest of them. Okay. Bluetooth, battery, clock, media. Okay. We don't need to do anything here. Spacer. Need to here. Okay. Alright, now they all take a config. Now main is all broken because it is not passing the config here. So we're going to have this call thing here take a config. So we're going to have this take a config, which is a config. And we're just going to pass that on. Copy it. Oof. What is going on here? Caps lock on somehow? I don't know. But these are seeming backwards. Anyway, config. Yank in parentheses, paste, 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 paste. Alright, so now it is passing config from there, but now we still have an error because when we're calling call down here, we are not passing the config. However, we do have the config here because we loaded it right up there and we used it to loop through. This, by the way, is why we need to call clone on modules so that we can pass config on down. Alright, so now all of our modules are getting a copy of the config, so once we do start putting stuff into the config that the individual modules need to read, now they have access to that. So we can see that. There's a warning over here. I'm a little bit curious. Okay, it's because of that. Alright, and we still have warning here. Yeah, we don't need to. This is already referenced, so we don't need to do that. Alright, all our warnings clear. Okay, so now we have all our modules in separate things, and we have that config being passed down. So now we go write all these, when we go write battery, we can look in that config file, and we can expand that to include some battery properties. Now we can get in there and actually look at that when we're building out how our battery is going to work. So next video in this series, we will actually start building out these individual things and seeing how we're going to get that system information from Hyprland so that we can show these things Hyprland in some cases. In some cases, like the Bluetooth stuff, we're going to get it through, Blues and Bluetooth control, etc. It depends on kind of what we're doing. So we'll have one for Hyprland workspaces where we'll be using HyperCTL or some library to get stuff out. But we'll get into each of them, maybe a couple at a time, and we'll get our bar in. Right now, we do have a fully configurable bar. We're kind of done with everything other than just implementing these individual modules. And I showed you previously in the last video how we can use popovers to show kind of the, things like this, or like this, So that'll let us get that kind of functionality too. And yeah, that's it. So hopefully that was useful and informative. And hopefully you'll stay with me. And if you're new to watching these, like and subscribe, of course. And I will continue doing more videos in this series as we build out this burn bar, as I guess we're calling it, named after the channel. All right, and with that, I will get out of here. See you guys next time.